The way we build and update our homes reflects the modern advances around us. But imagine living in another century for a moment. What would it be like to design, build, and live in a home without any mass production as we know it, or without modern systems of electricity to power everyday appliances? So Jane, here we are at the Israel Crane House in Montclair, New Jersey. Talk a little bit about the history of this home.
The house was built in 1796. It was built by Israel Crane, as you mentioned. Lived in here with his wife and 5 children. Then he passed it to his son in 1840. His son raised his family here with his wife, Phoebe.
As part of its amazing history, the house was moved across town in 1965. The kitchen was separate from the main house and had to be recreated.
If you had any money, you'd have an exterior kitchen, because on a day where it's really hot, the last thing you're going to want to do is put a fire in that fireplace to cook your food. The hearth fireplace, for example, gave women a tremendous amount of options when you cook, because you could either cook on the hanging crane or you would pull coals out and put them on the hearth. And when you did that, you could have 8 or 10 different pots and pans. Your rafters were equally as important, because that's where you'd store a lot of your food. Everything you grew, you had to save over the winter so you didn't starve. And all of this space would have been filled with stored food.
Another thing that was very different was that parlors were actually used as the areas where you would welcome visitors. Mm-hmm. This house, I understand, had more than one parlor?
It had the front parlor and the back parlor. One of the back rooms was also a family parlor, so it was much more personal than the front parlors were, which were used for receiving callers. Heating was simple. You'll notice that every room in the house has got a fireplace, and that's how they would stay warm. That was it, until probably about the 1870s or so, when they actually put in some sort of coal or some other kind of furnace to heat the place. The house looks like it's a wood house from the outside, but inside it's actually stone. There are 2 theories for this. One is that perhaps it was for insulation. The other is that it was a fire block, so if the house caught fire, hopefully the stone would stop it from spreading.
There are other distinct ways American homes were built 2 centuries ago.
They would build a house from the ground up. And so your framing, your studs that are in the wall are going to go all the way from the basement all the way up to your roof. Today, the method of framing is completely different. You're going to see that it's done in platforms and layers. They do the first floor wall on the ground, and then they stand it up. And then they put the ceiling on top of it and the joists. And then they do the second floor wall on the floor, and they stand it up to make the second floor. They were very sustainable back in the late 1700s. Everything was regional. So where the house was going, they cut the trees down, they sent trees to that local mill, so the wood clapboard siding would be milled locally.
Fast forward to the end of the 19th century, as building methods and ways of living were evolving.
So Jane, tell me about the Schultz house.
The Schultz house was built in 1896. It was built by Charles Schultz. 3 generations of the family lived here.
The kitchen is really a snapshot of modernization if the snapshot were taken just before the turn of the 20th century.
The only exception to that is the stove, which came in the 1920s. There used to be a big coal stove in there. But I suspect that when Charles finally passed away, the women of the family said, enough of this coal stove, we want something modern.
The house includes a once state-of-the-art woodworking room. Compare these tools to ones you might have in the garage or basement. Every room is testament to what was cutting edge at the dawn of the 20th century.
This is the age when you started to see plumbing introduced to houses. So you'd start to see in this house, you've got the sinks in every room. The bathtub was normally one for the house, clawfoot tubs normally because they weren't built in. You didn't see plumbing in mass housing until really the 1920s and the 1930s. At the turn of the century, electric lighting was a new concept. So a lot of times you would see dual systems so that the lights would be gas and would be electric so that they can be converted back if this newfangled electric didn't last. Windows is definitely a place where you can see how technology evolved. The Crane House being that late 1700s era, a window is made up of a lot of small pieces with wood in between, and that would create the panes. But then as technology advanced, you can get bigger pieces of glass. You see some of the bottom sashes are one whole pane of glass.
Generations ago, it took lots of time and muscle to build and maintain a house like this. Makes you appreciate today's innovations and all the options we have, from floor to ceiling.